Okay, we are recording. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Dan Doggett, and I am with the Maryland Department of Disabilities IT Accessibility Initiative. And welcome to today's webinar, Writing in Plain Language, Making Communication Clear, Concise, and Effective. Before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. First, we do have live captioning available today. If you can enable them by clicking the More icon in the Zoom meeting controls toolbar. Also, today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel for future reference. We will also send an email out to all registrants with the link and the presentation slides once we have those available for you. And lastly, this is a training today. Feel free to add your comments and questions in the chat or the Q&A, and I will do my best to keep an eye on them as we go through and answer any questions you may have. We are probably not going to take up the entire hour today, so we'll have plenty of time for questions as we go along. So let's take a moment to review our objectives for today. By the end of this session, you will be able to understand the core principles and benefits of plain language, why it matters and how it's improved communication. Apply key strategies to make your writing clear, concise, and accessible, and use helpful tools and resources to assess and enhance your writing. And I see I have a comment here from Matt that says there's a dedicated captions button now along the controls panel. Thank you, Matt. I'll have to update my slides for next time. Okay, so what is plain language all about? And to get started with that, we're going to watch a clip from one of my favorite shows, and I hope I enabled sound here. So before we dive into our training today, we're going to watch a short clip from the HBO series Succession. It's a great show. Doesn't matter if you've seen it or not. All you need to know is that this character, Greg, is about to be questioned in a congressional hearing. So here's a short clip we're going to start with today.
Gregory Hirsch, executive assistant to Tom Wamsgans, correct?
Yes. Yes, if it is to be said.
I'm sorry?
If it is to be said, so it is.
Are you all right?
Yes. I merely wish to answer in the affirmative fashion.
You can speak to us normally.
Okay. No, thank you, sir. So I shall.
All right. Someone give me a thumbs up or let me know if you're all able to hear that. I think I shared the sound for folks. But I wanted to show that clip because, okay, thank you, Naomi. I wanted to show that clip because it really drives home what we're going to be discussing today. And also, I love the show. So people often use complex and wordy language or legalese in their writing, especially when they are in formal or professional settings. This can often create confusion for the intended audience. And so writing in plain language ensures better comprehension and makes sure that the key messages you want are understood. So what is plain language? Plain language is really just clear, well-organized writing that helps people understand information the first time that they read it. Think of it as writing that doesn't make people stop and scratch their heads. It uses simple words, an active voice, and a logical structure so people don't have to work hard to figure out what you're saying. Let's take a moment to discuss what plain language is not. Some people seem to think that plain language is writing less precisely. Plain language doesn't mean being vague or general. In fact, it requires us to be even more precise, choosing words that are more clear and specific to our audience. Plain language isn't dumbing down information either. It's about making information more accessible, not assuming people can't understand complex ideas. Again, the goal here is clarity, not oversimplification. And plain language isn't about being overly casual or informal either. While it should be conversational and easy to understand, it should still be professional and appropriate for the context. And being concise doesn't mean leaving out important details. Plain language ensures that the reader gets all of the information they need without unnecessary complexity. Keep in mind, plain language is again about clarity, accessibility, and effectiveness, not oversimplification or cutting corners. So what are the benefits of incorporating plain language into your writing? First, it makes life easier for the readers. If they understand something right away, they don't have to reread it or ask for clarification. This means there are fewer misunderstandings and mistakes, which saves time for both the reader and the writer. For example, if a government agency provides new services for their constituents, clearer language means that there are less calls and emails from the public about them. And from an accessibility standpoint, it increases comprehension for people with cognitive disabilities or lower literacy levels. It's even included as a success criteria in the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, if you're familiar with those. Then another added benefit is for people with limited English proficiencies, since it's both easier to read and easier to translate. So really, plain language helps everyone. So one tool used in measuring the complexity of writing is the Flesch-Kincaid readability score. When people refer to reading at a 5th grade reading level, they are referring to this metric. And the Flesch-Kincaid ratings are based on syllables per word and words per sentence. For plain language, we try to aim for roughly a 5th to 8th grade reading level. And an important thing to note is that just because something is at a lower reading level does not imply that it's meant for children. I do want to note that there are some mixed views, specifically on using the Flesch-Kincaid scores for measuring plain language. However, these metrics are used in some of the tools that we'll cover later, and so I just want to make sure everyone's aware of it. So let's take a look at some different reading levels. Here we have 3 different versions of the same information at different reading levels. So at the college or 16th grade level, I'll read this for you. It is a truth universally acknowledged, that dogs, with their amusing antics, adorable faces, and undying loyalty, are beneficial to human beings. And here's the same information at a 8th grade reading level. Everyone agrees that dogs are beneficial to people. Dogs cheer us up by acting in an amusing way. They look adorable and are endlessly loyal to us. And finally, here is a 3rd grade reading level. Dogs are good for people. Everyone says so. Dogs act silly and cheer us up. Dogs look cute. Dogs are loyal to us. Okay, so those are 3 different reading levels. And what's important to note here is that all of the information conveyed at the college level is still present in the 3rd grade reading level. So here in Maryland, we are now working on implementing plain language statewide. In July of 2024, Governor Moore signed an executive order that requires all state agencies to use plain language in all of its communication with the public. The goal here is to make state government more accessible and understandable for all Marylanders. So in short, plain language makes sure we're reaching everyone effectively. So let's discuss how to make our writing more accessible. And to do that, we're going to need to understand the 5 key principles to plain language. So there are 5 key things to keep in mind when writing in plain language. Number 1, know your audience. Think about who's reading and what they need. Number 2, be clear and concise. Don't use 10 words when 5 will do. Number 3, use common words. Skip the jargon and fancy terms. Number 4, use an active voice. Make sentences direct and engaging. And finally, number 5, organize information logically. Use headings, bullet points, and short paragraphs to break things up. So we're going to go into each of these in more detail and provide some examples now. Starting with knowing your audience. So this is a big one. Before you start writing, ask yourself, who is going to read this? What do they already know? What do they need to know from me? If they're not experts in a topic, avoid technical terms. And if you have to use them, make sure you explain them clearly. When you write for your audience in mind, your message lands better. And so we have a before and after scenario based on knowing your audience. The before scenario says, it is imperative that all individuals utilizing this service possess a thorough understanding of the procedural requirements prior to initiating the process. And after, before using this service, make sure you understand the process. Simple and effective. It's also important to be clear and concise. Nobody likes reading long, complicated, sentences. The trick is to keep it short and get right to the point. And so here's another example. In order to successfully complete this project, it is essential that you follow the instructions carefully. And the plain language version is follow the instructions to complete the project. See the difference? The second one is shorter, clearer, and just as effective. Moving right along to common and familiar words. Sometimes we use fancy words when we don't need to, like in the clip I showed you earlier. But plain language is all about keeping it simple. Instead of utilize, just say use. Instead of in accordance with, just say following. The simpler, the better. Next, use an active voice. Active voice makes sentences stronger and easier to read. And here's an example. In passive voice, the report was written by the manager. And the active voice version of that would be the manager wrote the report. The active version is much clearer and direct. So whenever possible, use active voice. It keeps your writing crisp and more engaging. Here's a couple more passive and active voice examples. So our passive examples are, the ball was kicked by me. The game is being won by our team. Some new shoes were bought by me. Then converting them to active voice, I kicked the ball. Our team is winning the game, and I bought new shoes. Now, very rarely is someone going to write new shoes were bought by me. However, this gives us an idea of how active and passive voices work. Okay, organizing information logically. If you've ever opened a document and felt overwhelmed by like a huge wall of text, this is a situation where formatting really matters. Use headings and guide readers and break things up into sections. So use bullet points and numbered lists, and it makes information a lot easier to skim. And that way, people will find what they need faster and will thank you for it. So here's an example here, a list of my hobbies. And so as you can see on the screen, my hobbies, I have that as a header. And these are all activities I love to do on a regular basis. And then I use bullet points to list those hobbies: playing soccer, riding my bike, and writing in plain language. Yes, writing in plain language is one of my hobbies. Okay, so here's another example of taking a wall of text and putting it in sort of a logical reading order. So the before example, which is much harder to read, is this: employees must complete the form, obtain manager approval, and submit it to HR. The form is used for requesting leave, changes in work hours, or other modifications to employment status. It must be submitted at least 2 weeks in advance unless there is an emergency. And now, organized for readability, we have steps to submit a work request form. 1, fill out the form. 2, get your manager's approval. 3, submit it to HR. Much clearer to read. And one thing you'll notice here is there's information that is in the first example that is not listed in the second example. And some of this is based on audience and what the reader needs to know. And so, the reader doesn't need to know, this all of the different ways this form is being used. They just need to know how to fill it out, and what the steps are to get it done. And so the next thing we want to take a look at is formatting for readability and accessibility. So good formatting makes reading easier. When you're in a Word document, stick to at least a 12-point font. Arial and Calibri are great choices. So use white space to separate ideas and make the page feel less cluttered. And it's also a good idea to bold key terms, but don't go overboard. Too much bold or underlining can basically nullify them if everything is bold or if everything is underlined. Okay, so we've gone over some, principles some key elements of plain language. So let's take a look at some tools and resources available to you for your own writing. And the first thing we're going to start with is the Microsoft Word readability check. So this is a great tool if you're already working in Microsoft Word. And it works very similarly to the accessibility assistant in Microsoft products, if you're familiar with that. And it provides a Flesch-Kincaid score for your writing. So on the slide here, I've provided a link that gives instructions on how to enable this feature in your Microsoft Word, depending on whether you're using Office 365 or just the standalone platform or an older version. Our next tool is the Hemingway editor or Hemingway app. Is this available in Google Suite? No, this is a Microsoft product, Lindsay. So I'm not sure if Google has a similar tool, but that's actually something to look into. So thank you. But the next tool is the Hemingway editor, which is an online tool that highlights complex sentences, passive voice, and unnecessary adverbs, helping you to simplify your writing. So if you were in our last training, when we looked at automated accessibility checkers, it works in a similar fashion, but specifically for writing. So it's especially useful for identifying areas where your text could be more direct and engaging. And the free version alerts you to potential errors. However, there is a paid version as well that has an AI component that will provide suggested revisions. But basically what you do with Hemingway is you take your text and copy and paste it into the app, and then it will provide it will highlight where there's issues like passive voice being used or too long sentences. And I'm also going to include these two other links that are important for plain language and accessibility. Both have tremendous amounts of resources on them. The first is plainlanguage.gov. It's a fantastic resource for understanding best practices in plain language. It includes guidelines, examples, and other tools to help you write clearly, especially for government or public-facing communication. And the other link I have here is the web content accessibility guidelines that were mentioned earlier in today's presentation. So these focus mainly on digital accessibility, but I'm including them here to show sort of how plain language fits into the larger realm of digital accessibility in general. Okay, so now we're going to take some time to practice some of our skills we learned. Everyone should have received an email with the subject line plain language training writing exercise with a Word document attached. If you didn't receive it, that's fine. I can include it here in the chat. So we're going to take roughly 10 minutes to sort of practice writing some samples in plain language and then sort of go over those after we're done. It's three samples. Don't feel rushed to get all of them done. This is just sort of practice for us. And we're happy to share them or not go over them after the fact. And so I do see that some people didn't receive the email. So let's see if I can attach it here. If not, I'll just sort of copy and paste. Yeah, it is not letting me attach it. Okay, well, let me copy and paste. So this will be in the chat. Okay. Copy. Not copying to my clipboard. Hold on. Sorry, folks. I'll make sure. Boy, it is not liking this today. One more time. Try this way. Oh, you know what? That might be too much text. Let's try it this way. Aha. All right. Here's number one. Here's number two. And here's number three. Okay. So I'm going to put a timer on. This is not, don't feel stressed to finish these all in that time. This is just going to be sort of a time check for us so we know when we get back. So it's currently 1:23. So I'm going to get this started now and we'll come back in 10 minutes. I've also put all of our sort of key principles of plain language up here to sort of help remember them as we go. So feel free to use those and let's get started. So enjoy. All right, well, let's take a look at some of our results here. I'm going to see if I can get let me move I'm going to move this over here so we can look at this at the same time. Thank you to those of you who've already contributed. Again, we're just practicing here. This is just practice. So starting with, and yeah, feel free to, keep putting in your messages in the chat. We're going to sort of go over this together. So starting with our first exercise using active voice. So our original example, the students were annoyed by the tedious grammar exercises given to them by their instructor. So if you were, so in this case, we're looking for passive voice, and there's actually two instances of this in the sentencing. So we have annoyed by the tedious grammar exercises, and then we also have given to them by their instructor. So it's actually sort of a double passive. So let's take a look. I'm going to go over to the chat and sort of scroll back up. We got so many answers here. So thank you. Let's see. Okay, so Mary says the students were unhappy with their complex grammar exercises. Yep, there is no passive voice in that at all. John says the teacher's tedious grammar lessons annoyed the students. Hopefully that's not the case today. Looks great, John. The students were annoyed by the grammar exercises. Thank you, Nadia. Okay. And Raina says the students were upset at the work given by the teacher. Okay, looks good. Want to make sure, so given by the teacher, that's still in passive voice. We want to sort of move, move those words around for next time. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at number 2, using lists. And so our original example says failure to file an answer within the 30-day period may be treated as consent to the award requested unless the department or other agency requests an extension of time for filing or files a statement of intent to negotiate under paragraph B of this section. Yeah, that definitely sounds like some government documents that I've read in my time. So let's take a look, see what we have for number 2. I see Marianne says, if you don't respond within 30 days, it may be considered as agreeing to the requested decision unless the department or other agency asks for more time or says they plan to negotiate. Okay. Let's see. So we want to try to use lists to sort of, or lists or bullet points to sort of break down that information. Let's see. I see Kelly has one that says failure to file an answer within the 30-day period, number 1, may be treated as consent to the award requested. Number 2, may be accepted unless the department or other agency requests an extension of filing, or number 3, may not be accepted unless a statement of intent is filed to negotiate under paragraph B of this section. Okay, so they're very good. So if you look at Kelly Crawford's example here for number 2, it's a great use of using lists. Let's see another one here. I want to find another list. Here's one from Kendall. So so Kendall used bullet points here. Failure to file an answer within 30 days may be treated as consent to the requested award unless, bullet point 1, the department or another agency requests an extension or filing, or 2, bullet point 2, the department or another agency files a statement of intent to negotiate under paragraph B of this section. And one thing I want to point out here, and this is, this might be a, not a huge thing, but something to consider, when to use bullet points, or when to use numbers. So these are both considered lists. Bullet points are unordered lists, and numbers are lists. So if you're working on, let's say, a procedural document and you're working on procedures, you want to stick to numbers because that will, show the order in which they'll go. And then bullets are great when it's, in any of these situations, you want to show that. So that's really good for that. So thank you. Let's see. Okay, so let me find one more. Okay, so Raina for number 2 says, failure to respond within 30 days may be treated as consent unless 1, the department requests an extension, 2, or files a statement of intent to negotiate. Okay, really nice and concise there. So great work on that. Okay, and let's look at our third and final exercise, using clear and concise language. This is a fun one because we try to put in a bunch of words that, sound really important. So the original example says, we initiate this proceeding because it is our belief that we need to facilitate the development and deployment of well-designed signal boosters, which hold great potential to empower consumers in rural and underserved areas to improve their wireless coverage in their homes, at their jobs, or when they travel by any means, such as car, recreational vehicle, or boat. Okay, that is quite a mouthful. So let's look at some of our examples here. Sorry, people's chats are coming in as I'm looking, so it keeps moving the screen a little bit. All right, so Tamu says for number 3, we started this proceeding to help develop and use signal boosters because it may improve wireless coverage for consumers in rural and underserved areas. Super clean, super concise. definitely cut out a lot of that unnecessary language and information, you know, recreational vehicle, boat, like these are not things that are necessary to get the information across. So great job with that. Let's find another example for number 3. All right. Tenny says, we believe that this deployed boosters will help improve wireless coverage for all consumers in all areas. Okay, nice, short and to the point. Very good. All right, and let's find one more. Nicolette says, we are moving forward with the development and deployment of well-designed signal boosters. Okay, all right, very good. So I hope, you know, had us start to think a little bit more about the language we use. And, you know, there's changing already created language to plain language. And then there's also, you know, start writing with plain language in mind initially. I actually think it's a lot easier to start thinking about plain language initially than it is to try to go back and rewrite your information. So thank you all for, you know, practicing that with us. That was great. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. All right, note to self, don't use this timer again. Okay, so let's do a quick recap on how we want to write in plain language moving forward. Number 1, know your audience, write specifically for their needs. 2, be clear and concise, get straight to the point. 3, use common words and an active voice, keep it simple and engaging. 4, organize information for readability, use headings and bullet points. And lastly, format for accessibility, make sure it's easy for everyone to read. So if you remember these 5 things, you're well on your way to writing in plain language. So great job today, everyone. So at this time, I want to see if folks have any questions. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to check the Q&A here. Okay, so Naomi has a question here in the Q&A that says, would it be an issue to use medical terminology when the audience is only nurses and the information being given is related to nursing? Plain language would be used when we are speaking or teaching family or an individual. Okay, great question, Naomi. So what, you know, the first important thing here is know your audience. So if you are speaking to an audience that's going to know, so I'm not a nurse, I don't know a lot of terminology. Okay. So let's say you're working with specialists that work specifically with traumatic brain injury, which a lot of people call TBI. And so if you're writing specifically to, you know, practitioners that work specifically with, you know, with TBI, you know, that's one of those things that you don't necessarily have to spell out for them, because that's you know, a common term used in that field. But generally speaking, if it's like the first time it's that you know, that's being used, you want to you know, explain it to the audience if, you know, they wouldn't know that information originally. So great question. Have another question here from Brenda. So yes, I'm gonna email the slide deck and the link to the recording of this probably by Friday at the latest. So everyone will have access to the links and all of the information provided here. And then Jen says, is there a resource to help translate legislation into plain language? Yes, plainlanguage.gov is the place to go for that. And I agree that bills and proposals, you know, can be difficult to understand. And so, yeah, I would definitely go to plainlanguage.gov. All right, we have another question from Brandy. Oh, hey, Brandy. I work in utility regulation and law. Some stuff is just way too complex to break down and give all background on. But there are people that do understand this. Can we put this on our website? It's tough to get that type of information into 5 to 8 languages. Yeah, so I will say, in terms of if you're referring to the plain language executive order that Governor Moore signed in to practice. I believe this there are exclusions for this. So Brandy, you could reach out to me offline and we can sort of just discuss the specifics of that and how that might affect your offices. Okay, so great questions in the Q&A. I'm going to check the chat, see if there's any more. You think footnotes to provide additional information serve as a tool, benefits of document written in plain language. So Amy's asking about the use of footnotes, or do I think footnotes may overcomplicate a document? It really depends on the document itself and the audience that is using it. Obviously, like if you have 20 footnotes at the bottom of your document, that might make things a lot harder. Generally speaking, like we do this a lot in government where we'll talk about, like I work for the Maryland Department of Disabilities. So if I'm writing this to an audience that's not familiar with my agency, I'll spell it out the whole way the first time, and then in parentheses put MDOD, and then from then on out after that, I will then just refer to it as MDOD. But knowing that the audience may not know that acronym initially, that sort of helps with that. So I hope that sort of helps you there, Amy. All right, and so we have some other questions here. Yes, lots of jargon in public health. Yeah, my wife works in public health. I know that very well, Brenda. And then Mark says, does plainlanguage.gov translate existing regs, like regulations and law? I'm not sure, like there's a lot of information in there, and a lot of it is about writing plain language. But I'll have to check, Mark, to see if they have that as a resource. But I'm not sure off the top of my head. But that's a great question. Okay, so next question here, and I knew this was going to come up. Do the tools, so Nicolette says, do the tools recommended align with our guidance for AI tools? So Nicolette, I'm not sure. Do you work for the state of Maryland, state employee? Okay. Do we have guidance yet on use of AI tools? I wasn't sure if Do-It had released anything on that yet. Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I will say that the Hemingway app is, so I'm part of what's called the Plain Language Initiative Working Group for the state. And we are, we're sort of going through and investigating which tools we're going to be using and recommending for the state. And right now, Hemingway is one of those tools. I do not know about the other AI tools, whether ChatGPT or Claude, how that works. I need to learn a little bit more about our AI policy to give you more information on that. But I'll look into that for next time. So thank you for asking. All right. Okay, let's see. So I got one more question here, and thank you for these questions. Tamu says, what is your advice regarding public-facing documents that are hundreds of pages long and written by subject matter experts who do not use plain language? So are you referring, Tamu, if you're saying in terms of going back and sort of like fixing hundreds of pages of documents for plain language, I wouldn't expect to go back and try to fix those things. I would instead think about the documents and things that you're creating going forward and working on using plain language moving forward rather than going back. I think that if we tried to go back and fix all of our documentation for plain language, that would probably take up the next decade of our work easily. So, but it is tough working, with folks, especially subject matter experts that, may not know or may not be thinking about, their audience. So again, this is, something we want to work with folks and get the word out about plain language to help everyone. So a lot of great questions here. So thank you so much for that. Okay, well, that's great. So I think that's all of the questions in the Q&A, and I apologize for any of the things I wasn't able to answer for you all. But you all, this is a great discussion, and so happy to look into a lot of these things for next time. So I hope you all found something helpful in today's session. And again, I'm going to have the slide deck and the link to the YouTube video available, hopefully by Friday, definitely by Friday. So watch your email out for that. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. So thank you so much.